Thank you, Emily. Uh, Last month, we heard from leading national experts on the value of including retail recruitment in a comprehensive economic development strategy. But like any strategy, the next and most important step is execution. To achieve success, communities need proven techniques, sound tactics, and the right tools. Well, good morning, all. I'm Jason Cannon, president of the Wake Forest Business and Industry Partnership. And it's my pleasure to welcome you NCEDA members and guests to today's webinar and to introduce our moderator. This virtual NCEDA professional development event is the second of a two-part series on retail as an economic development tool, presented by our allies at Electricities of North Carolina. We're grateful for the support of Electricities, and in a moment, I'll turn the podium over to Jennings Gray to get us started. But first, let me draw your attention to the names and logos of some very special organizations and companies, including Electricities, that make webinars like this one possible. They are all NCEDA annual sponsors. We're grateful to them for their support of NCEDA's mission throughout the year. I want to say thank you to each of these sponsors that we're recognizing. So even before the pandemic, retail faced an uncertain future in an era of e-commerce. But COVID-19 delivered its own fierce blow to retailers, bars, and restaurants. But as we soon begin finding ourselves in some version of a new normal, retail will continue to be a viable avenue for job creation, talent recruitment, fiscal diversification, and place-based economic development. In North Carolina, if you think retail economic development, the name Electricities immediately comes to mind. Few organizations are more vocal in their promotion of retail as an economic development strategy than this key NCEDA member and partner. Jennings Gray is Senior Retail Development Specialist at Electricities. He brings over 14 years of experience in economic development, local government, and retail site selection. Jennings works with North Carolina communities, including county, municipal, and downtown development organizations, to successfully embrace opportunities in retail recruitment. He's an active member of NCEDA, IEDC, and other professional organizations. So now, I'll turn the webinar over to Jennings, who will introduce our guest presenters and moderate today's discussion. Jennings?
Thank you so much, Jason. Appreciate the introduction. And again, I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar today. And on behalf of Electricities, we're just so proud of our partnership with NCEDA and very grateful for the leadership that this organization has and continues to serve all of the members across North Carolina. As Jason said, I'm part of the Economic Development Department at Electricities, and we are managed by Brenda Daniels, and my colleagues include Carl Reese, Senior Economic Developer, and also my colleague Charity Barbie is a Senior Retail Development Specialist. And Charity usually covers the western part of the state, and I cover the eastern part of the state. So we're always available to help our member cities and municipalities and towns, cities. So we're on standby whenever you need us. This morning, I'm very proud to introduce our speakers today from Retail Strategies out of Birmingham, Alabama. I'd like to introduce Lacey Beasley. Lacey currently serves as the president and formerly as COO. She has been involved in retail real estate since 2005. Her experience with the Shopping Center Group and the Dickson County, Tennessee Chamber of Commerce prior to joining Retail Strategies provides her with the insight to understand the connections needed from the public and private side of the conversation. She's a graduate of Lipscomb University, go Bisons, and she earned a major in marketing and management. Lacey has served on committees with CCIM, EDAA, and multiple ICSC planning committees. In 2018, Lacey was named to the top 40 under 40 and the top 40 under 40 for the decade. I'm not sure if she gets to stay under 40 for a decade or not. I'm not sure. Maybe she can help us figure that out. By the Birmingham Business Journal, and included in nationwide 100 top 100 influencers in commercial real estate, and listed as Birmingham's 8 emerging influencers. And I would kind of add that's probably beyond Birmingham as well. I think there's several cities would have her list as the emerging influences as well. She has been published in Shopping Centers Today, Site Selection Magazine, and the Alabama Retail Federation. Lacey grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, and I have it on pretty good authority. She knows the secret to the alien landing theory. So we look forward to hearing from Lacey. Also joining us today is John Ruzick. John joined Retail Strategies in 2019 as a portfolio director, bringing 3 years of experience in residential real estate sales and marketing in the Mobile, Alabama market. John's unique career path has allowed him to gain knowledge in land acquisition and development, neighborhood revitalization, and blight reduction, historic rehabilitation, and adaptive reuse. A Louisville, Kentucky native, John graduated from Sewanee, the University of the South, in 2010 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science. He obtained his Alabama real estate salesperson's license in 2016. In his free time, John enjoys spending time on the water, traveling, reading, and exploring old buildings, and most recently breaking into his own office. So, John, we're grateful to have you on the call today as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lacey to get us started.
Thank you so much, Jennings, and thank you to Electricities of North Carolina and NCEDA for allowing us to be here today. And thank you to each of you as participants for taking the time and interest in professional development and learning more, because as we know, education is it's power. Knowledge is power, and that's what we're all doing today, is just sharing ideas. So it's an honor to be here and just share a few things that we've seen in retail. As Jennings mentioned, I've been in the industry since 2005. I would say that retail is perhaps the fastest changing and most dynamic of all the commercial real estate sectors, and so it's constantly evolving, changing. That's certainly true in 2020 and will be true in 2021. We're so honored to have partnered with Electricities in North Carolina since 2013, working with dozens of communities all over North Carolina to assist them in recruiting retail, restaurant, hotels, and everything to their community, just business recruitment essentially to the communities. So we have about 8 examples here today that we can walk through and share with you, where we're really just things you can expect to see as you are implementing your retail recruitment strategy. But we want to leave it open for Q&A. So please use that Q&A box. John Ruzick is a portfolio director who works every day with our North Carolina communities and works with Electricities, with Charity and Jennings and their team with Carl and Brenda. So he really knows all the intimate details of all the transactions that we have in these communities. And we're really here to applaud those partners and the hard work that they've done in understanding retail, and we really want to make this interactive. So please plug in those questions. We will do our best to answer all of them based on the knowledge that we have. And if there's anything that we can't answer for you today, we will certainly get back to you with the answer, because fortunately we have a pretty wide network. We are based in Birmingham, but we are a national firm, work with about 150 municipalities on a full service consultant basis, where we develop a retail recruitment plan and we work with them to implement it, and then we train about another 200 communities across the country every year. So North Carolina and our partnership with Electricities has always been very valued partner of Retail Strategies, and we're honored to be here with you today. So so glad this is a 2-part series, and the Retail Coach was a fantastic company that did a great job of setting those national trends of what we are seeing, what we historically saw, some things we might expect in the future, because obviously there was a great deal of disruption in 2020. So I'm glad you're doing both parts of this series. And if for any chance you missed that, or you just need a simple kind of recap, if I'm to oversimplify what we saw in 2020, I would call it the Great Accelerator. And it was the Great Accelerator causing bifurcation of businesses. There were things such as just really the evolution of retail, things that innovation that would have naturally taken 5 to 10 years to happen happened in a matter of 12 months. So we ultimately will probably be the winners as consumers with what happened in 2020. It's a shocking stat that retail sales were actually up over 6% year over year. And the rural communities that we work with said that they saw their local sales tax actually increase as people were working from home, and the grocery stores, the fast food restaurants, home improvement concepts, we're all seeing anywhere from 10 to 20% increases. Liquor stores saw about a 200% increase. So rural America actually fared better than any of us would have expected when back in March of 2020, when the pandemic was announced to all of us. So we're excited to be here today, look at some best practices of actually boots on the ground transactions, but more than happy to answer any of those trends or get really into the detail of it. So as I mentioned, John Ruzick is our portfolio director, working directly with the communities in North Carolina, and he works with our whole team here at Retail Strategies. So please plug in those Q&A questions, and Jennings Gray will be moderating this throughout. We don't mind interruptions at all because we want to make this about you. You're carving out your time and it's precious, and we want to honor that and be sure that we're answering whatever's burning on your mind. So let's just start here. You know each of us, but let's start with just some basic examples of what we've seen as good overarching practices. It was nice to be introduced by Jason Cannon, and so first we're just going to start with Wake Forest. I'll turn it over to you, John, to talk a little bit about the importance of proving a retail trade area and how you can do that.
Sure. So thank you, Lacey, and thank you, Jason. So I think the number one lesson in recruiting retail is understanding that oftentimes people in the government sphere and people in the retail real estate sphere speak a totally different language. And our job as you know, in recruiting retail to a market is to understand that language and really tell the stories, tell the community story in a way that resonates with retailers. Tell it in their language, and that language is one that's rooted in data, in revenue, in population, and most importantly in objectivity. So in this example, we're going to look at Wake Forest, North Carolina, that has a population of I believe roughly about 43,000 people. So with that said, though, you know, the tax-paying population, or what I might call as the Wikipedia population, what you would yield with a Google search, that really means very little to a retailer. More importantly to a retailer, they want to know the number of consumers, not the number of citizens, but the number of consumers who are likely to shop in a market on a regular basis. And then they want to drill down on that demographic data of that population. So again, looking at number of consumers rather than the population of a city along city and county boundaries. So in order to understand what that consumer population is, what we do here at Retail Strategies is we run what's called a mobile tracking study that uses location tracking applications on a cell phone to ping customers within a specified area. Then we actually follow those consumers to their home location. That sounds a little bit scary, but that's the world we live in today. And what that helps us to do is really to get an understanding of where people come from to shop in a market like Wake Forest. So the map that we're looking at here is an illustration of that exercise. And what the study shows is that Wake Forest, North Carolina retailers have a much larger draw than simply the consumers who live in Wake Forest. Based on this mobile tracking study, we see that while a majority of shoppers reside in the immediate Wake Forest area, and that's shown by those red squares there, the market actually draws shoppers from as far as Franklinton or Lewisburg, and this significantly bolsters Wake Forest as a retail destination. So a city of 43,000 people actually has a trade area population of well over 200,000. So you can see that that's showing you a picture that's more accurate to a retailer, and that rather than looking at the population of tax-paying citizens who live in Wake Forest, they're looking at the number of people who are highly likely within the month, to go and visit Wake Forest, to shop there, to eat there, to spend money there, et cetera, et cetera. So it paints a much stronger and more accurate picture of consumers in Wake Forest. Again, telling the story in a way that resonates with retailers. We're speaking their language there. So I would say the main point that I want to get across here first, and kind of the number one rule in retail recruitment, is that you need to know your retail trade area that tells a much more compelling story than just your population along city and county boundaries.
Thank you for sharing that, John. And it's so important to know that the bottom line, at the end of the day, everything you're doing with data is to back up the story on how that retailer can be profitable. Profit drives all of this. So showing those consumers that they could potentially pull from 200,000 rather than 43,000 is part of that trade area. So next, what we want to do is look at the different strategies that you want to take for your national retail corridor versus your downtown. We at Retail Strategies, we work with both sides, downtown and with local businesses and the nationals. And one thing I want you to consider as a community leader and economic development director is the differences in those two and the different strategies you have to take. Wilson, North Carolina does a great job of this. So when you look at the real estate of downtown, it looks very, very different than the real estate of Main and Main on the highway where there's the largest traffic count. And there's a variety of different things that drive that. So when you think about downtown, think about unique historic buildings and how you get an asset-based approach, get those buildings ready to attract the entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneurs most likely are about 99% of the time are local or regional brands that don't have to have that prototype that's so standardized by the nationals. This is the character of your community. It's the heart and soul, and it drives quality of life. Then you transfer out to the main retail corridor where you have the national retailers, and you think about the difference in the two, and the nationals really drive those daily amenities, those services, and they drive jobs and sales tax. So that's more of the commerce side of it. The economic impact is highly driven by the national retailers. Different approaches for each, and we believe that you need different subject matter experts for each of these because they're almost exactly opposite. So don't mix that up in trying to recruit national retailers downtown and try to really save up your local entrepreneurs to go in these downtown buildings, get the buildings ready to attract them. I think this is an important time to address why retail in general. Well, traditional thinking in economic development was to just go after those high paying jobs. The rooftops follow that, and then the retail takes care of itself. And we believe in today's environment with a millennial workforce, the exact opposite is true. Think about how different millennials are from baby boomers. Traditionally, the baby boomer generation would move somewhere and they would stay in that same job for 30 years. And so that worked. Today, then the millennial workforce finds somewhere cool that they want to live, and then they back into a job. So having both a vibrant downtown and the national retail corridor helps attract your workforce that then helps you attract the high paying jobs. So John, do you want to, or we'll hit this together. We'll go over some home run real estate. What is the difference and what drives the real estate downtown versus the real estate out on the highway? And here are a few universal site metrics. Whether you're Taco Bell or you're Costco, you care about these things. I used to be a site selector for retailers, and we would go to their real estate committee, and these are the things that we would always have to address. What's the highest traffic count possible? What's the ingress and egress? How do you access that shopping center? What's the visibility? Is it blocked? Parking, critically important. Parking is one of those key things. You think about a national retailer and all those parking spots are right out in front of the front door. Very, very different from downtown. Co-tenancy, you think about the hours of operation for downtown versus nationals and how different those are. So this is just a high level overview of some of those things that make home run retail, and the things that the nationals want. They want these elements to be as good as possible, and several retailers will say, here are the 5, and I might give on 1, but if you make me give on 2 or 3 of these things and they're not ideal, they know that it's going to hurt their store sales, and they would rather relocate in an area, the type of real estate where they can get all 5 of these things. John, do you have anything to add to the home run real estate?
Yeah, well, so I think that one of the things to remember too is that retailers and their site selection committee, they know these things. They know these things that they want more than me, than you, than Lacey, than anybody. They know that their consumers the best, and they have a very tried and true formula in which they choose their sites. And so, one of the best pieces of advice I've heard from a retailer before is that, it's the guy who said, I hate coming to these shows, and I hate people coming and tell me where they think I should go. I know where I want to go. I just want the information to make a decision. So I think one of the best things that you can do is collect this information and try to learn from the retailer what they're looking for, rather than present them a site and say, this is where you need to go. I think it's best to arm them with the information, let them make the decision themselves. But and like I said, every both downtown, or like Lacey said, rather, both downtown and retail and national retail corridors, they have their place and they have their tenants, and I think that both are equally important. One of the reasons that we chose Wilson here is that really they have the best of both worlds. They have a really vibrant downtown that's growing, but they also have a really active retail corridor. Both retailers on both sides of that spectrum add a lot to that community, and both are equally as important for many different ways. So just one thing to remember there, and that both sides of that equation are important, and both need to have attention paid to them.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. And they each have different strategies for how they are going to achieve that, which is very beneficial. So, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about Laurinburg and what they did? I think this is a great example for all of our economic development directors across North Carolina to think about.
Sure. Yeah. So, one of the frustrating things in retail recruitment or retail development can be sometimes that you don't control the retailer's actions, nor do you control the land. But in some cases, in a really happy case, the city may, or the county may control land that is an outstanding retail opportunity. So one of the strategies that we like to talk about with our clients is, what land does the city or the county own? Is it a good retail play? So using those home run retail or home run real estate kind of check boxes there, if you can identify city or county owned assets that are underutilized and represent a strong retail site, that's a great opportunity for you to step in and sort of have one half of that equation already completed once a retailer starts looking. So you can market those sites as potential retail development sites. You can and you can arm yourself with increased sales tax and ad valorem revenues to kind of make a case for why this property needs to be developed. So Laurinburg is a great example of this. They had city-owned land that was adjacent to a really strong performing shopping center, the Scotland Mall. So you've got your retail co-tenancy. It had high traffic counts and also high foot traffic in that shopping center. Also, it had great parking and great visibility from the interstate there. I think that's 74 there. So you had a lot of these ingredients for a recipe for a great retail site. So Laurinburg was able to take advantage of this by bringing in a developer, bringing in electricities to assist them in kind of understanding the pros and cons of development here. And actually, they have some offers on the table that could result in turning this property into a $4 million taxable evaluation. So just a really awesome story there to show that there's different ways that you can bring retail to your market by utilizing assets that you have that are underperforming currently that could become a really awesome retail play.
It's a great story, John. Thank you for sharing that. So you heard that number of the ROI on this, and you think about property, and sometimes retail doesn't necessarily make the radar for how that property should be used. I think it's really important to point out the retail synergy here. That's a critical driver to additional retail property. Now, if you look at the backside of this property, it might have multiple commercial real estate uses, CRE uses to it. So it can be a combination of retail and something else, depending on all the metrics and how that property is configured. So if you have city-owned property, it's worth taking a look at and figuring out, is there a retail play there and what kind of return will you get off of it? Let's talk a little bit about Clayton. I think this is another great example that you worked with Electricities and you, John, worked together.
Sure. Yeah. So even if you don't necessarily have city-owned property that represents a great retail play, As a city or county official, you're in a very unique position, and oftentimes you know about things that are going to happen before they actually happen. So transportation infrastructure changes can prompt the emergence of a higher and better use for real property. So, as a government official, economic developers can often be privy to these changes before others are, and they can realize an opportunity before others might. So using that knowledge, they can pave the way for retail by solving issues before they arise, whether that's zoning, access, signage, traffic flow. Again, all those things that sort of create home run real estate. If you know of a site that's going to all of a sudden be opened up for higher, better use, perhaps it's residential, perhaps it's undeveloped property, that all of a sudden becomes a corner site, then you can really work to alleviate some of those barriers, kind of remove the hair on the deal, so to speak, before before the questions arise or the drama starts. So this is an example here that happened in Clayton, North Carolina, where a plan punched through on North Carolina 42 will create a hard corner on an already high trafficked highway there. So by removing the barriers to entry, the town of Clayton is able to prepare an A+ site here for, whether it's convenience store or gas station use, quick service restaurant, any number of different retailers here are going to be clamoring for the site simply because there's a little bit of foresight there. People understood that this punch through was actually going to create a really highly desirable retail site, and that became something that really was a great move for Clayton because that retail synergy, it starts with just a single tenant user. So even though that might not sound super exciting that we cleared a way for a gas station, that is going to increase the traffic of that site. That's going to open up areas for other users to come in, whether it's quick service, whether it's restaurants, whether it's other types of retail, that eventually come in simply because you've opened up one single site, maybe even as small as an acre, to start that retail ladder building.
It's a great point that all the retail recruitment doesn't have to be Trader Joe's, even though we love them. Even starting with a C-store or a QSR, which are really rapidly expanding right now, can help build that case. And as John used a term that you'll hear a lot in our industry, which is hair on the deal. And that essentially means how many hurdles am I going to have to hop over? And the other term is time kills all deals. So the more hurdles there are, the more hair on the deal, the longer it takes the developer or the retailer to make that transaction happen. What you can do as an economic development director is to move those barriers to entry, and it makes it very appealing so that time doesn't kill the deal. What we found in a lot of cases is when we match up a property owner and a retailer or a developer, that's really when the work starts. You're in economic development, you know how long this process takes. So you really have to walk through a lot of steps. So thinking ahead and removing those hurdles is a critical thing in retail. So speaking of hurdles, let's talk about the importance of really having the right conversations with the relationships you have in the industry and the property owners so that you are aware of them prior to marketing properties. Let's talk about some unseen complications, John.
Sure. So I think the most important piece here that I want to stress is that, do your research. I think that when you're building rapport with a retailer or with a developer or with a tenant representative, the most important thing to do is to learn what they're looking for and deliver them sites that they actually can consider. Nobody wants to sift through a million different sites that aren't really what they're looking for. It's like going shopping for clothes and finding a bunch of things that don't fit you. I only have smalls, I need an extra large though. So it's really kind of frustrating. And so I think that one of the best things that you can do to really develop that relationship with the retailer and encourage them to come to your market is to understand what they're looking for and do a little bit of the background research yourself. So what we've talked about a lot here is home run real estate and how you can really impress a retailer by bringing them sites that check all those boxes. However, you're not done there. You really need to do your research a little bit further to understand any other barriers that might occur. So in this example, we've analyzed the center. This is a center in Monroe, North Carolina, on the southern part of the market. So it checks all the boxes of being home run real estate. There's access, there's parking, there's visibility, there's signage, there's plenty of space, it's priced right. But what we do have here is notice that on the far right of that site plan there, who do you see? A pretty significant national user there is Tractor Supply. So Tractor Supply, like a lot of other national retailers, will exclude competition in their lease. And in that lease, and those exclusions in that lease may run with the deed. So even if the property is sold, even if Tractor Supply leaves, if that lease is still active, then those exclusions still stand. So a couple of examples of exclusions that you might see, McDonald's may exclude other hamburger users from being on adjacent outparcels. Walmart will often exclude any of their competitions. So general merchandisers like Dollar Tree or Family Dollar are not allowed by virtue of the deed for Walmart to be in a center that shares space with Walmart. The same goes for grocery stores. So oftentimes you'll see that Walmart specifically by name excludes Aldi or Food Line from occupying the same center that they do. So in this case, we had a contact with a pretty significant national retailer called Rural King. So Rural King had interest in buying this center in order to backfill that 87,000 square foot vacant box there. However, in doing research on the lease, we found that even though these centers are separated by a ditch kind of in the middle there, Tractor Supply still excludes any other farm supply user from the center. So what we were able to do here is kind of save some time for Rural King by showing them, hey, look, this is a great center, it checks all their boxes, but we were able to uncover this fact kind of that was deep down in the pile there. And we understood that Rural King really couldn't go here even if they wanted to. So they can move on, they can look elsewhere, they can find other opportunities in the market. But what this example goes to show you, though, is that even if it does represent home run real estate, there's other factors that may limit a retailer from opening and doing business there, and we need to be aware of those too. And you can really add value to the job of the retailer, the site selector, the tenant rep by doing that additional research to understand, whether a retailer can pursue the site and be successful here.
Mm-hmm. And it's a great point and leads us well into our next example in Albemarle. I think when you think about early on, John and Jennings both addressed how there's kind of different languages that are spoken. The retailer speaks a certain language, a developer speaks a certain language, the municipality speaks a certain language, right? So we're in some regards become a translator, as you are in your role in economic development. And so it's understanding each one of those players and the language that they speak. And that's really one thing that we've learned is anything that's a time waster for a developer, a retailer, and especially a broker, because they're only paid a commission when a transaction happens, then that's a big turnoff for them. So really narrowing things down to save them time to have this detailed information on the specific property in advance so that you're teeing it up on a silver platter and doing their homework for them and saving them time is a critical way to add value and build relationships in this industry. So John, you want to give us some more examples of relationships that were built in Albemarle, North Carolina, for example?
Sure. So on your right, on that slide there is a picture of the Shops at Olive Place, which is a huge win for Albemarle. It's a great retail development with a lot of strong anchor tenants. It's built in 2015. Here, 7 years later, it's still continuing to thrive. So what Retail Strategies did in this example was we formed a relationship with the developer very early on by assisting with their filling of small shop space around those anchor tenants of Hobby Lobby, Ross, TJ Maxx, etc. So by bringing value to that developer in the form of retail prospects, offering to assist with outreach, providing market research and demographics, we formed a long relationship with that center owner and the leasing broker that continues today. So that relationship is completely transparent. It's mutually beneficial. And although the needs of that shopping center have kind of changed as it grows, as time goes on, we continue to communicate openly and we can offer each other advice and assistance as needed. So they've gone to bat for us, we've gone to bat for them, and it's just, like I said, a very mutually beneficial relationship. So this is a great example of how a municipality, or in our case, a consultant representing a municipality, can work together for positive outcomes when it comes to retail growth. So, another point to stress here is longevity in your retail development staff. Electricities is a great example of a team of professionals who have built relationships in the industry, over the past decade or so in a really consistent way. So keeping that relationship consistent by avoiding turnover, having some way to kind of smooth over those relationships when you do experience turnover, it's really a way to bring value to property owners, retailers, and municipalities alike, and treat that relationship in something that is a back and forth, a give and take. I'm sure that every one of you can think of a property in your community where you're frustrated with the owner, you're frustrated with the leasing broker, they're a pain, the relationship is soured. But what I would encourage you to do there is, rather than having your city staff berate those property owners, you try forming a relationship where you attempt to offer your expertise and your skill to help them solve a problem, or maybe help them solve a problem they don't even know that they have yet. But really just, again, bringing value and helping them to form a relationship around that value. It will always benefit you. Maybe not in the short term, but 100% in the long term, it will serve to benefit you, as well as hopefully them. And so speaking of that, another example in Albemarle of that relationship by bringing value involves the development of the coveted Chick-fil-A. So by forming a trust-based relationship with the property owner who is kind of unsure of long-term plans for a former Ryan's Steakhouse site that he owned, our team was able to keep open lines of communication throughout the entire time that he owned it. Like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty of what was going to happen with the site, but when the time is right, we were able to bring Chick-fil-A and introduce him to that retailer, to this property owner, of which we had a really open and trusting relationship. We had offered him our expertise and skill in the past, so he trusted us as an ally and knew that we were going to help him to do the right thing for that site. So when the time came and the right offer came, it was a seamless transition. Everything happened correctly, just as it should. And now the people of Albemarle are able to enjoy a great Chick-fil-A. It's a win for all. So the property owner, the retailer, the city, and of course, all the cows on the billboard, we're happy with this. Yeah.
Very important. The cows on the billboard. We're happy. We get more requests for Trader Joe's, Target, and Chick-fil-A than any other retailer across the country. So, and I actually read a stat recently that it is easier to get into Harvard than it is to open a Chick-fil-A, just so you know. So this is a really exciting thing. And I think the point here is, as you know, in economic development, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a relationship-based industry. And the way that you do that is through really adding value and staying that longevity. You build trust over time. Electricities is a fantastic example of this. In Albemarle, we've been partnered with them for 7 years. In Lumberton, almost 8 years we've been partnered. And it provides that sense of consistency with the relationships throughout the course of the partnership, which I think is critically important because, as you know, time is where the trust comes into play. And once that value is built, it's hard to constantly restart that process, right? So think about the longevity and the importance of having one person really focused on retail that's going to be there for the long haul. Now, Lumberton is just the story of, man, it's amazing how committed this city is to retail. And there was when we first started working with them, then we started calling on several retailers that we thought were a good fit for the market. And we had this reoccurring theme of, okay, the trade area is larger than I thought. It makes sense. It's right on the cusp. If I had the right site and the right co-tenancy for a shopping center, I'd probably consider it. So with that, kind of assembling all that interest and then packaging that up and taking it to a developer looked at about 130,000 square foot shopping center with 6 out parcels next to the Sam's Club. Did a really deep dive, ran the numbers, and the way it works in development is they run the number of what's it going to cost to build the shopping center essentially, and then what can they collect from the retailers, and then how does the bank value that asset, which is a cap rate, and then they can sell it or they can hold it, but your cap rate is what really matters. So it's just this simple kind of equation. They call it a pro forma, that the cost versus what you collect in rent, and then the cap rate. Well, the developer took a deep dive on this, and there was a floodplain and some beavers or something of that nature. I can't remember exactly what, I think it was beavers. There was some sort of animal on this property. So it became quite a challenge to do the extraordinary cost of the site work that went above and beyond what a typical pro forma would require. So they taught through their relationship with Elector Cities, with Retail Strategies, and talking to the developer, they said, we just can't make this work. It's not a big enough return for anybody at the end of the day. So we presented that to the city of Lumberton, to Wayne Horn and Brandon Love, who said, let's really take a look at what we can do to partner up with them. And the city and the county came together. We ran an economic impact analysis to look at the jobs, sales tax collection, and the property tax, the incremental property tax above and beyond what was currently being collected, and came up with an estimate of what that might look like. And through that, we're able to offer an incentive package to the developer to look at that public-private partnership to keep this project alive. This was so narrow. It was so close. There was a lot of time, a lot of negotiation. Ultimately, over a span of about 4 years, maybe 4.5 years, there were 3 different developers that looked at this that said there's no way they would even be looking at this if it hadn't been for the city's commitment in this public-private partnership. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, that project did not work. The site costs were just too high, and what the retailers were willing to pay wasn't high enough. But what happened was it put Lumberton on the map for all these national retailers that were interested. And so several of them came back and said, you know, I still like Lumberton a lot. I really wanted this shopping center, but I can't make that work. And so several of them came back and found individual sites scattered throughout the city of Lumberton to open in, which was a big win. And so the example here is like having a full tank of gas when asked for a ride. Lumberton they put themselves on the map through being aggressive, offering this incentive. They knew how to speak the retail language. They knew how to craft an incentive package. And so they put a lot of work into it, and that was not at a loss because they have a great deal of new retailers now. So Hobby Lobby is one example of a retailer that was going to anchor that new shopping center, but they ended up backfilling the Lowe's grocery store, which was struggling and having a hard time. So Hobby Lobby went into that former Lowe's. We also had a vacant Kmart pop up in the market. And so through that, there's now a Big Lots, Planet Fitness, and all these bargain brands that are all in this vacant Kmart, and that's been completely revitalized. You can see that one on the bottom before and above after, and how much sharper that looks in. And certainly the sales tax it generates, the jobs, and overall the quality of life that builds that retail synergy that helps attract other retailers. So Lumberton's a great example. I will address for just a minute how important I think it is to think about public-private partnerships and incentives when it comes to retail. This is something that varies across the country. A lot of states are heavily driven by retail sales tax, and others are not. Their motivation for retail is more about the jobs that they'll pull from those retail businesses, but also the quality of life it'll bring to their community to attract the workforce that then helps them attract the primary employers. So retail does matter across the country, and public-private partnerships have become the new normal in shopping center development. And it's, excuse me, it's something important to think about. Alabama is a state that's very aggressive on this. Texas is very aggressive. Tennessee and Oklahoma all do a fantastic job of it. And when you think about these developers and they're working across the country, or even the retailers, if Hobby Lobby is going to open 40 locations in the country this year, you're not just competing with your neighboring city in North Carolina, you are competing with the entire country. And this is something other states are doing. And I'd like just to challenge you to consider public-private partnerships when it comes to retail. And I know that's fairly unconventional in North Carolina, but happy to talk about that more if you'd like. Here are a few bullet points just to recap what we covered. Know how to prove your trade area. know the different strategy you have for national retailers on the highway versus the downtown and the locals. Character, quality of life versus the revenue generator. Have different strategies, different subject matter experts for each of those things. Understand what home run real estate is. Do that research. Understand it. If you have any city-owned property, think about, is it a good play for retail? And if so, how can you really market that and control that property, and what kind of return will it create? If you know of something that's happening to the infrastructure that's going to change the traffic drivers for a main highway, then think ahead, take the hair off the deal. So, time kills all deals, right? So make it easy, make it quick. So it's very appealing to those developers. Do your homework, have a relationship with the property owners so you can overcome any unforeseen complications, and knowing the property owners so that you can add value over time and be that consistent voice for retail over a long period of time to make those connections happen. And then ultimately know that this is a marathon, not a sprint, as you do in economic development. So stay consistent, stay the course. And even when you get told no in retail, or you put a lot of time and energy and effort into a big win and it doesn't come together, what you've done is you've put yourself on the map. You've learned how to speak the retail language, and you've built trust with the industry. So not everything's a yes. If it was easy, we wouldn't exist as a company. It is difficult. We get told no a lot, but that's a part of it. And that's what you do to really commit to having those wins. So please go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A box. And Jennings was more than happy to moderate those questions.
Thank you so much, Lacey and John. That was a great presentation. One of the things that I'd like to add is a general comment to some of your project examples there. In Laurinburg, just a quick comment that commercial real estate often changes, and with mergers, acquisitions, closures. Here's a great example of Laurinburg being proactive in their approach to protect their revenues, sales tax, property tax. We all heard, in the local news recently about Belks, filing for bankruptcy protection. And even though it looks like for now that all the stores will remain open and they'll continue to be successful, but if that had been a different story and Belk were to close, here's Laurinburg already, as Lacey said, I mean, to attract a retailer replacement like Belk's, I mean, that's going to take a 3-year process to do that. And so Laurinburg has shortened that. I mean, they're right on the verge of getting another retailer in that market that would certainly help stabilize that market should another retailer leave that market. So kudos Laurinburg there. Another kudos I'd like to send out would be to Clayton. It's a really interesting story here because retail strategies really help to bring in a national developer for one particular piece of property, and now that developer is so knowledgeable about the Clayton market that they are looking at other sites in Clayton. So what resulted in one corner piece of property now has equated into 2 possible projects for Clayton. So kudos to Clayton on that. And thirdly, I really appreciate your comments about incentivizing retail real estate. As a former county economic developer, we were always kind of ingrained to not incentivize retail. But now that I'm in this industry and see kind of what we're looking at there is that for industrial real estate, industrial economic development, it's really an external competition. You have you look at the big Amazon competition that went nationwide. It was clearly that you're pitting one state against another state, one city against another city, and it was kind of known that you were competing for this one facility. In retail, as Lacey mentioned, like Hobby Lobby having 40 stores, okay, probably, and I know with my experience with Lowe's Hardware, that whenever they're really building a lot of stores, building 150 stores a year, we would look at probably 300 to 400 sites for those 150 store locations. So it was an internal competition that the cities weren't even aware of really was even going on. So I really appreciate your comments regarding that. The question that we have in is, how do you view a suburb community trying to create a new downtown? How does a retailer look at that location? And Lacey, John, I'll just turn that over to you.
Sure, I'll start and then would love to hear your thoughts as well, John. And I think when you say a new downtown, and then you're thinking about new buildings, new construction, as opposed to revitalizing a historic downtown, I'm assuming that's the question. Traditionally, if you think about the way that a downtown is laid out, and you think about those buildings being right up on the road, and you might have buffers or pop outs that will be in between the road and the retailer that help with that pedestrian walkway, right? That's how you want to design a downtown. When you think about national retailers and they want that parking space directly in front of that storefront, the elements of that just don't line up quite the same. So we found for downtowns, whether it's new or revitalized, typically it's going to be better served for a local or regional brand with a little more flexibility and more of a destination type draw, with that unique thing that wants you to go there, wants you to go out of your way. Now, I'm not saying that no nationals locate downtown. We know that that does happen. Obviously, national retailers do on occasion, but you have to have extreme population density and really pretty high incomes in order to make that work. A lot of times downtown, it doesn't have the daytime and the nighttime population. Sometimes it has either or, doesn't have both. And that becomes the challenge for the retailers. And also when you think about retail synergy and some of these national retailers that will stay open late into the night and long hours on the weekends, that can be very different for a downtown business that might only be open from 10 to 4 Monday through Saturday, right? And so that's hard for the cross shopping concept. And so I would still say, even if it's a new downtown and it's on a riverfront, then I would still encourage you to think about those unique brands and think about this as your character, right? You don't want to be generic America. We like national, we follow national, we do that, but there are thousands of McDonald's across the country. Reserve your downtown for what is that one place that makes you incredibly unique. John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're definitely not alone in that question, because I see almost all of our clients who represent sort of a primary suburb type of community. For example, we have one right outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, one right outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and one right outside of Memphis, Tennessee. That all three of those communities have expressed interest to us in the last 6 months to a year in creating a downtown. It's really more about placemaking and creating a community where families can enjoy, rather than maybe revitalization. So like a couple of points, I would encourage you, to sort of change the paradigm maybe from downtown to like mixed use development. It might be the right word that you want to use for that. And then also as part of that mixed use, incorporating a residential piece can often be sort of a catalytic project to that type of thing that can jumpstart that. Like you say, in some cases, you just need population. And so by bringing in, some sort of like workforce housing or rental type of housing stock, that can really encourage people, just a higher population that encourages a retailer. And then to echo Lacey, you're often not going to have a whole lot of luck with nationals. You're going to need to heavily rely on local, which really, isn't a bad thing. That's going to lend a lot of character and a lot of credence to your development. And the last thing I'd say is that those type of developments right now, they're expensive. And so for a private developer, the expense often can just make that a complete unreality. So be prepared as a municipal organization to enter into a partnership with the developer or somehow lend a hand in making that a reality. One example I can give you in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, is that they've formed a land bank that's actually been purchasing property in an area that they want to create a mixed-use development to create a downtown. So at one point, once they kind of have all that land tied up, they're going to then be able to kind of issue an RFP or even enter into a memorandum of understanding with a preferred developer that can then, they really have some control over what happens, but they kind of stay in their lane and let the development work go on to someone who knows what they're doing in that realm. So just a couple of thoughts on that. I'd love to talk to you more about that though, if that's something that you want to pursue. I think that's awesome. It's definitely a passion of mine. I think it's really important, again, getting to the point where you're encouraging and growing your national retail corridor, but also doing something with placemaking and making a community a place where people want to come back to with their families.
Agree.
Great, thank you, John. We do have a couple other questions that unfortunately we kind of run out of time, but we will get those questions answered post webinar and make sure those all the questions that were asked get answered. So again, thank you, Lacey. Thank you, John. Very informative, great presentation. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Jason and for closing comments.
Lacey and John, thank you guys. We appreciate the great expertise and the guidance that you provided us today. It was also a nice surprise to see Wake Forest lifted up for a moment in the presentation, so thanks for that. And Jennings, thank you for the valuable role you played in today's moderation of the panel discussion, and really for all you do for so many of us across North Carolina. We're grateful. I once again want to acknowledge the generosity of NCEDA's annual sponsors, all those supporters we shared with you at the beginning of today's webinar. Their support is just critically vital to all this organization is and what it does. I want to offer a special thanks to Electric Cities of North Carolina for its generosity in presenting this important two-part webinar series. And so now for more opportunities from NCEDA, there's still time to register for this week's Emerging Executives Forum. It takes place virtually this Thursday from 8:30 to 12:30, and it targets NCEDA members who may be new to the economic development profession, though we certainly welcome all members who are interested in gaining some great insight on creative incentives and the changing links between economic theory and the practice of economic development. Of course, watch your email for additional information on upcoming webinars, and don't forget our virtual spring conference on March 17th. In the meantime, I hope you and your family stay safe and well, and I thank you all again for being a part of today's event. Have a great afternoon.